So the PlayStation 4 Pro has been an all-around success for Sony. The system is boasting that it can outperform its predecessors and then some. While the system may appear to be everything it promised, we can assure you it is not. Where did it all go wrong? What is wrong with this system? Well, it's the important question we're here to answer in this video. Before we begin, don't forget to hit the subscribe button to keep up to date with all the exciting content on the gamer. Now it's time to look at everything wrong with the PS4 Pro. Headsets. Now this might not seem like a lot, but we'll ask you, dear viewer, to consider the following. With the push for online gaming today, having a reliable mic and headset is vital. It has been for quite some time, but now more than ever. Gamers need a headset to properly play online. Now this hardware does not need to be top-of-the-line quality, but one has to ask, with a new system coming out and all, couldn't we get a new headset? Maybe one with two buds instead of one? Look, we're not making a mountain out of a molehill, but Sony has to meet us halfway there. You're boasting a system capable of 4K Ultra HD graphics, an extra gigabyte of RAM, and all the other bells and whistles, but you can't even give your customers a decent headset? Note we said decent, not amazing, or top of the line. Well, in the grand scheme of things, it could be worse. We could have no headset, but we would like to think that Sony can do better. Not up to snuff. Yeah, so about those high marks for graphics and power, those claims might have come with a few strings attached. While on the gaming con circuit, Sony boasted about how their PS4 Pro was going to be twice as good as the vanilla system with double the graphic horsepower. But some gamers were not as satisfied as Sony would have liked. In fact, with games like Skyrim, Watch Dogs 2, and The Last of Us Remastered, there have been a number of performance issues. These issues can arise when plugged into a 1080p TV and can cause lag issues. Watch Dogs 2 runs at a higher resolution but can suffer from glitches, game tearing, and frame rate drops. Skyrim can run at the native 4K, but just like Watch Dogs, suffers from frequent frame rate drops. What is the most shocking is that The Last of Us suffers in both 1080p, 60 frames per second, and in 4K, 30 frames per second mode. As it stands, there's no way to fix the specs to the original PS4 graphics outside of just playing these games on your vanilla PS4. Moreover, this touches on the debate some gamers are having with the way games are being made and marketed. With these systems pushing 4K graphics, the question becomes, why go through all this trouble if the gameplay is what's most important? Incoming back in my day moment. But when you look back at older games, you remember them more for their gameplay, not just cutting-edge graphics. Final Fantasy, Legend of Zelda, Crash Bandicoot, the list goes on. But these games all thrived on solid gameplay mechanics and not flashy graphics. With the rise of indie games, we may see this return to a focus on mechanics in the future, but for now, we can only hope. Extra USB ports. Along with these updated graphics, gaming peripherals are at an all-time high. With PlayStation, you have the wireless controllers, Move controllers, the PlayStation VR and headset, but the PS4 Pro does not have an extra USB port. Now, the extra one the PS4 Pro comes with is nice if you have something like the PlayStation VR. Having a nice amount of ports in the back ensures you don't have a massive web of wires cluttering the front of your system. The problem comes when you try and do anything with these ports. When you have a PSVR and also a wireless headset, PlayStation Move controllers and all the other peripherals, those ports can fill up fast. Now, this may seem like another one of these small things to complain about, but this is kind of touching on another issue in gaming. These gaming peripherals aren't as rampant as they used to be. Veteran gamers will remember things like ROB, the Super Scope, and Virtual Boy. But with VR and consoles here to stay, there needs to be an appropriate amount of USB ports so gamers are given the chance to enjoy everything a brand has to offer, without resorting to power strip USBs or other extensions. Maybe consoles will be phased out and PC gaming will reign supreme. Yeah, one can only hope. 4K Blu-ray. It may seem like a thing of the past, but some of us enjoy collecting physical media. I know, right? While we may have ditched our VHS and DVD collections, some still relish in collecting Blu-rays. Now, Sony is a company with many products, one of which was an Ultra Blu-ray player. While this nifty piece of hardware has made the rounds with the competition, being often included in their system refresh, the PlayStation 4 Pro does not support 4K Blu-ray. This might have more to do with the push for digital content rather than simply excluding hardware, but consider the following. If you want a consistent 4K quality, your system and connection need to be top-notch. Streaming content has become more popular, with what Netflix and chill being a thing. In fact, it was shown PlayStation users preferred streaming content over buying physical copies of games and media. While this can be seen as an acceptable cut that increased profit margins, streaming in 4K can be a very taxing process, which could be made easier by having a physical disc. At the very least, having the option would have been preferable, not to mention the simple economics of getting a PlayStation 4 Pro with a 4K Blu-ray player would be better than simply getting a Blu-ray player on its own. Indifferent to the naked eye. We may have touched on this issue before when mentioning the frame rate drops in a few notable games on the PlayStation 4 Pro, but we wanted to shift the focus a bit and talk about the real hard-hitting question about 4K. Does it really matter? We just got Ultra HD for goodness sakes. These specs for the PS4 Pro seem nice, but when you look at the price tag, you have to really ask yourself if the jump to 4K is worth it. To demonstrate our point, here is an image from Horizon Zero Dawn in 4K. Haha, actually, it's in 1080p. Can you honestly tell if it was in 4K or not? Can the naked eye really pick up on these differences in quality while running a video game at a constant 30 frames per second? For the sub $200 price increase, is this really much different than the vanilla PS4? Answer down in the comments which would you prefer, a game that lags maintaining 30 frames per second at 4K, or a system which handles 1080p at a constant 60 frames per second. Now obviously there's some difference in the quality, but what we're saying is for what we get and the price we pay, perhaps we would be better off with a more reliable system, huh? Gone native. Okay, look, we get it. The whole 4K thing is being done to death, but it was a huge selling point for the PlayStation 4 Pro. However, that claim came with a huge asterisk, which has a lot of muddled strings attached to it, so it can be a little confusing at times. Basically, a majority of games are not native 4K, which means they were not designed to be optimized for 4K. We talked about a few of these games in previous entries, but there are more which had to be rescaled into 4K than not. Some of the games like Skyrim and The Last of Us Remastered are in native 4K, so this is not a problem, but others need some tweaking and are upscaled into 4K. While there is a pretty good upscaling tool in the console, which this seems to be a nice fix for now, there are some that simple will not enjoy this due to the fact that you need a 4K TV and all that jazz to get the full experience. Of course, all this glorious 4K goodness is kinda wasted if you're a Let's Player or streamer because YouTube's compression clocks in at 1080p. So your fans may not enjoy this kind of definition, but hey, you might, and in the end, that's all that matters. 1440p support. All this talk about upscaling and 4K is fine for 4K TV owners, but what about other screens and monitors? Games upscaled to 4K have a native resolution of 2650 x 1440. If you have a 1440p monitor, well, you might have to get a new one, but not really. Yet, the port HD screens have to settle for 1080p. Could Sony make these compatible with 4K HD? Sure, but it might be a conflict of interest seeing as Sony would also like to sell their brand of 4K TVs, and they can't have that. Of course, piggybacking off our previous entries about the negligible increase to 4K and how it relates to games, no one is really chomping at the bits to jump on 4K. Crash and burn. Like all electronics, things crash and then they burn. Who can remember the great Ring of Death blunder that happened when the Xbox 360 launched? Oh boy, those were dark times. Throughout the PS4 Pro's life, there's been some notable crashes and bugs which have plagued the system. A common one also affected the original PS4, too many USB devices error. This would cause the system to freeze and reboot while spamming there were too many USB devices plugged into the system. Of course, this error could still arise even if you didn't have any USB devices plugged in. To fix this, users recommended rebooting your PS4 in safe mode and then selecting the rebuild database option. This might take a while, but it should do the trick in getting the error fixed. Of course, this is old news, and wouldn't you know, there have been some recent errors and crashes linked to recent games. With the release of Destiny 2, PS4 Pro users have reported their system crashing often while playing the game. Bungie discussed this issue on their forums and recommended players turn off the HDCP setting on their console. This was proposed as a short-term fix for some users, while Bungie and Sony looked into the matter further. Some users reported the fix was working, while others were still left with the error. This leads to some speculation in other games. Could this happen again with future releases? Who knows? Connection not found. You know, we talked about problems with certain TVs and monitors on this video already, but this was a problem with the PS4 Pro around launch time. While it may have only affected a small number of users, it was a big enough problem where Sony had to mobilize. Users were complaining the PS4 Pro had trouble connecting to people's TVs. These problems could range from being no connection outright to having a picture but no sound, or vice versa. When the problem started out, Sony responded on their community message boards blaming the TVs at first, and then the TV brands fired back blaming the PS4 Pro. So, who was right? While some of the big-name TV brands responded by looking into their firmware, Sony put out a response essentially doubling down and saying it was most likely the TV at fault. More specifically, it seemed that, in their response, Sony was passively-aggressively blaming the PS4 Pro users themselves for not having the proper knowledge of their devices. Bad move, Sony. Never blame your audience. This created a back-and-forth triangle with the consumers, Sony, and TV manufacturers until the issue was sort of not really resolved. In any case, all of this negative PR was actually a boost for Sony's rival, the Xbox One S, which, while having a connection issue of its own, much smaller and more manageable than Sony's complete PR blunder. If for some reason you're still having problems with your PS4, there are some handy guides out there people have compiled. We've added some in the description down below. And that was everything wrong with the PlayStation 4 Pro. What do you think? Do you still like the PlayStation 4 Pro? Do you have another system in mind you want us to look at? Let us know in the comments down below. Don't forget to subscribe to The Gamer for more exciting and engaging content on the games you love. Thanks for watching.